The Invisible Woman has arrived, and boy did the team cook with this character. She's a strategist that not only has potent healing, but insane abilities that help her control the battlefield whilst keeping her allies protected. But we can almost guarantee almost everyone will play her wrong. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and here's how you can master one of the newest heroes in Marvel Rivals, Sue Storm, also known as the Invisible Woman. If you didn't already know, our team has released 2 comprehensive videos sharing competitive tips for mastering all of the Vanguard and Strategist heroes at launch. But as new heroes get released, we're going to dive into them individually, because with each new character comes entirely new movesets and techniques that you can use in a match. We were lucky enough to play the Invisible Woman a few days ahead of the Season 1 launch, and we wanted to make sure you got off to a fast start. As I said in the intro, the Invisible Woman is a strategist, but she's one of the most capable support-focused heroes currently in Marvel Rivals, with the ability to not only heal, but provide stationary shields, manipulate the speed and positioning of enemies, and even output some very capable damage. She also just might be one of the most elusive strategists to lock down in a fight. Her primary attack is called Orb Projection. Using her psionic power, she can send out small projectiles that travel up to 30 meters away before returning back to her. In the process, these pass through all enemies, dealing damage without falloff, as well as allies, healing them in the process. Her basic attack is essentially Luna Snow's Ice Arts ability, but constantly active. This means positioning with the Invisible Woman is paramount so you can heal allies while dealing damage to enemies in the process. Because these pass through all targets at max range, she can output some serious damage to enemies in a line or grouped up just with her basic attack. Her secondary attack is Guardian Shield, and this one is absolutely going to take some time to master. When looking at an ally, you can generate a shield that not only blocks up to 300 damage, but also heals any ally close by. Additionally, any enemy that passes through the shield will be slowed temporarily. Now here's the thing with this ability. The lower it gets in durability, or duration it's out, the longer your cooldown will be if it expires, up to a max of 6 seconds. You can get around this by recasting the ability onto other allies over and over, keeping the ability up and providing your team a much more consistent source of healing and protection. You can also recall the shield once cast, and this is much more relevant if you plan on having the shield out as a more static defensive area for your tanks or DPS characters to make use of. When you recall it, depending on its remaining durability, your cooldown will be adjusted. Players will really need to be vigilant of this barrier's durability and positioning in order to make the most out of its slowing and healing effects in the heat of a battle. It's also important to note that the Invisible Woman has a melee ability, Agile Strike, and it has a significant knockback on the 3rd hit, so when you're about to get dove by an enemy backliner, starting this combo early can significantly help in keeping them off you when the time comes. Now, as expected, her mobility isn't anything to write home about, but that's because she relies on dipping into invisibility to move about undetected while also healing herself in the process. Her passive, Covert Advance, allows you to become invisible after being out of combat and not casting for roughly 5 seconds, and while invisible, as long as you don't re-engage in action, you're passively healed. Of course, 5 seconds is a long time to rely on this effect, and that's where the Veiled Step ability comes in handy. This is a double jump on a 6-second cooldown that has decent range, allowing you to cross some larger gaps. However, where it really shines is that the double jump immediately triggers your invisible state. Players that spam this on cooldown will find themselves in a pinch if they get jumped by a backliner, unable to quickly dip away. So make sure you are deliberate about its use, as it can quite literally mean the difference between life or death. Then you have Psionic Vortex, her shift ability, which allows you to fire out a projectile that will erupt into a vortex when it either hits a surface or when you manually trigger the ability again. This AoE will deal continuous damage over time while also slightly drawing enemies towards its center. Not only is this skill potent when used on groups of enemies, but it can also function as a really strong zoning tool. Placing this in a doorway, corners that are constantly being peeked, or even in elevated positions that Iron Man or Storm are constantly hanging around makes their lives that much more difficult. Then there's Force Physics, which actually has 2 different substates. Once triggered, a primary attack will push all enemies in a line away from you, while a secondary attack will instead pull enemies towards you. Both states deal a moderate amount of damage in the process. This ability has some huge potential, since not only can you knock enemies close to a ledge off the map, killing them, but being able to push or pull enemies into attacks or ultimates they otherwise would have barely escaped make the Invisible Woman a very dangerous strategist. Pulling enemies into your team that are too far away, as is the case with a lot of Vanguards, gives teams a constant threat they need to worry about. Duelists will think twice about peeking corners and doorways, as they're really no longer safe because the Invisible Woman can dislodge them, making them quick work for your own duelists. Finally, her ultimate, Invisible Boundary, might just be one of the most versatile support ultimates currently in the game. Upon activating, you'll be able to place down a large AoE in a chosen area that causes you and all allies to become undetectable by enemies outside of that area, while also providing significant healing over time to all allies inside. Now, I know a lot of people who initially saw this were thinking you can just slap it down on a control point and people can't contest you, and that's not really the case, but it does make contesting a point that much harder. Enemies can enter into the AoE, allowing them to see your teammates inside, but this does come at a temporary detriment. Any enemies who pass into the AoE will be slowed, and you can combo this with good positioning of your other slowing and position manipulating abilities. Enemies can also still damage players inside the AoE from outside, they just won't be able to see where or who they're hitting. I should also quickly comment on her team-up passive Fantastic Force, which helps fortify the entire Fantastic Four team by granting them passive damage resistance. The active ability that those heroes can use gives them temporary bonus health that constantly regenerates for the duration of the ability. With a fundamental understanding of her kit, I wanted to turn now and talk about some actual match strategies because, as you all know, it's one thing to understand the moves, but another thing entirely to execute it during a match. One mistake I simply know players are going to make right out of the gate is thinking the Invisible Woman's healing is more potent than it actually is. She really only has her primary attack and her shield to heal allies, and if you don't position yourself perfectly to take full advantage of her projectile's pass-through effect, you'll quickly find it's difficult to keep your team healed up. You want her attacks to pass through your allies both when casting and returning to get the most amount of healing, but you also want to position yourself so you're dealing damage in the process to help alleviate the pressure of an enemy team. During this season, also keep in mind she's going to get a massive boost to her healing because of the anchor bonus, so what seems really potent now might not be as much in the future. When it comes to her Guardian Shield, this will likely be a very easy way to tell high-skill Invisible Woman players from lower-skill ones. Keeping this ability from remaining in one spot for too long and keeping it from going on cooldown is essential. The passive healing boost it provides can't be understated, and using it to give your DPS characters, both those on the ground and in the air, the ability to peek around areas without being easily contested is a huge reason to pick this character in the first place. This gives your team's heroes a really noticeable window to get favorable trades on characters like Hawkeye, Hela, and so on, while giving characters like Iron Man and Storm some much-needed aerial protection. When you're not dishing out heals and shields, helping to control the position of enemies is your main focus. Making use of her Psionic Vortex to deny doorways, corridors, wall peaks, and even discourage tight groupings makes enemies constantly worry if they're truly safe where they're standing. Even when the AoE runs out, you should be making use of your force physics to pull enemies out of cover, bringing their tanks even further past the front line, and potentially pushing close-range enemies off your own tanks and DPS characters, giving them room to maneuver. It's also important to pay attention to the ultimates of your own team, as pulling or pushing enemies back into danger that otherwise might be on the edge of escaping means you can help secure a lot more kills. The Invisible Woman is a bully in the landscape of other support characters, and being able to also go invisible allows you to really threaten the positioning of an enemy team. Finally, and this ties into the invisibility aspect of her kit, really make deliberate use of your double jump cooldown to go invisible to save yourself or set up a flank. I can't stress this enough. Using this outside of these situations and wasting its usefulness will often lead to a backliner catching you quite easily once you're visible if your team isn't ready to immediately react. You can't use your Guardian Shield on yourself, which means you don't have a great way to save yourself in a panic or even really slow an enemy down who's beelining for you. Your on-demand invisibility out of your double jump is really your only defensive save, so don't waste it. So there you have it, everything you need to know to master the Invisible Woman. We already released a video on Mr. Fantastic, but we'll continue this series with the Human Torch and the Thing when they become available in the second half of Season 1. We need your help, of course. If you like this content and want more Marvel Rivals in your feed, hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.